Hey guys, welcome to week 2 of COM 252. Before we leave chapters 1 and 2, I wanted to talk to you about a couple of key concepts that you might not have paid too much attention to when you were reading over the chapters. In chapter 1, aside from the definition of communication, I wanted you guys to take note of two different ways of thinking about it. The first is one that uses a little bit of the textbook definition, but with an easy to remember mnemonic. Communication is the management of messages for the purpose of creating shared meaning. I'll say it again. Communication is the management of messages for the purpose of creating shared meaning. Now, one easy way to remember this is the 3 M's: management, messages, and meaning. The other version of the definition that I want you to remember is that communication is an audience-centered phenomenon. Communication is an audience-centered phenomenon. If I ask you, I want you to remember that. So it's the management of messages for the purpose of creating shared meaning, and it's an audience-centered phenomenon. The other takeaway that I want you to remember from chapter 1 is the evolution of the communication models. You see, if you just glossed over it, you'll make the mistake of seeing that there was the linear model, and there's the interactional model, and then there was the transactional model. But it turns out that the reason why we changed models is very important. When we first started drawing the models, it was very limited in scope, and we forgot to realize that human beings were interacting with each other. So we even messed up the first time and had to realize that there was the ability to respond, which we called feedback. But by the time we got to the transactional model, we realized that feedback was happening all the time. I'm talking to you and you are yawning, rolling your eyes, texting, talking to somebody else. How do you put that in the model? So they had to figure it out. The communication was happening all the time, in all directions. In fact, we had to come up with another word that was a little bit more fitting than the back and forth illustrated by the first two and even the third model that is discussed in the book. And that word is pervasive. So we now say that communication is pervasive and that it's everywhere all the time, right? We can't escape it. And it's happening on our phones and all around us, even when we aren't paying attention. And so that's the other takeaway from chapter 1. The other big takeaway from chapter 2 involving culture is that we are shaped by the way that we are brought up, right? We are shaped by our upbringing. And our cultures can be so many things mixed together. I was raised in a culture that had many different cultures all on one block, right? So my neighbors were older and younger. My neighbors had lighter skin and darker skin than my family did. Some of my neighbors spoke different languages. Most of us, though, had one thing in common, and that was that we weren't all that wealthy. In fact, we were quite poor. And so our cultures can shape our understandings of the world, but so too can the way that our families discuss basic ideas and basic concepts. You might easily understand this as the way that you refer to soda. See, I grew up calling it soda, and I didn't drink it. I didn't drink any carbonated beverages growing up, and that's why it took me so long to drink beer. I was brought up in a culture that called it soda, not soda pop, but some of you might have called it that. I have cousins that grew up in the panhandle of Florida, and they call everything that is brown Coke, right? And everything that is light Sprite. It's pretty weird, right? But that right there can just be an example of the things that we do that reflect our culture, okay? And so the other takeaway from chapter 2, in addition to that, is this idea of ethnocentrism. And I want to illustrate it by using this one example. Now, if I were to say to you, my mom's macaroni and cheese is better than your mom's macaroni and cheese, what would you say? Any disagreement? Can you imagine that even if you don't disagree with me on this particular issue, that some people might get pretty upset? Well, yeah, that idea right there, that there's no way in hell that my mom's macaroni and cheese is better than yours, that's ethnocentrism. You see, it's okay when we're talking about macaroni and cheese. My mom's macaroni and cheese is awesome. It has peaches on top. Yeah, I know you might think that sounds disgusting, but I just know that it's better. See, because it's the way that I was raised. Can you see what's happening here? If we scale this macaroni and cheese example up to other examples, like my local sports team is better than your local sports team, my dad's job is better than your dad's job, my country is better than your country, my religion is better than your religion. Can you see how ethnocentrism can go off the rails? Yeah. So I want you guys to think about that. In interpersonal communication, we have to remember that other people are full-fledged human beings. And while you might have your beliefs that one thing is better for you, you need to recognize that you don't have the right to say that something is better for somebody else. Anyway, that just comes with the territory. So that's wrapping up chapters 1 and 2. We're going to jump into chapters 3 and 4. Look for that in the next video.